It's always a pleasure to have my group back to talk about movies. You know how we like to do this. Before we get started, though, I would like to say a special thank you to the Wisconsin Veterans Museum Foundation for their continued support and all the free programming that we are allowed to put on, and not only the free programming, but also the paid programming. And by that, I mean cemetery tours. Coming up, if you have not gotten your tickets for cemetery tours, sorry, it's too late. We are sold out. Unless you have a group that wants to come through during the week. Our candlelit tours on Saturday night and our Sunday daytime tours are 100% sold out. We are expecting a huge crowd over the next week. Sally? And of course, support for the foundation coming in the memory of Pat Finley. So thank you to the Finley family and to the Wisconsin Veterans Museum Foundation for all the support that they give us throughout the year for all of our virtual programming, not only our movie nights, our trivia nights, our curator conversations, drink and draws, you name it. We got a lot going on, and I am definitely feeling it tonight. Hang on, I'm just admitting a couple more people here. Admit. All right. We got a good crowd tonight, too. That's excellent. We did have 12 people signed up. Looks like we got 8 people here. So most everybody who signed up is here with us tonight, which is fantastic. Like I said, tonight we are looking at the 1970 film Catch-22. This movie was directed by Mike Nichols, who has kind of an impressive directorial resume. The Graduate, Biloxi Blues, The Birdcage, Charlie Wilson's War, to name a few. There's a lot more going on in Mike Nichols' resume than I just suggested, yeah, he's got quite a lengthy filmography as far as his directing goes. Cinematography for this film was done by David Watkins, and you might have seen him in Chariots of Fire, or his work rather in Chariots of Fire and Out of Africa. Starring, wow, this movie has a great cast. I can't even believe it. Alan Arkin, Bob Balaban, Martin Balsam, Norman Fell, Art Garfunkel, Charles Grodin, Bob Newhart, Anthony Perkins, Martin Sheen, John Voight, Orson Welles. The list goes on and on, which I have a couple comments about in a few minutes. This movie was shot mostly on the near the Pacific, northern Pacific coast, right in Mexico, just below the Southern California border. And they constructed the entire Mediterranean base that they were at from scratch. And they figured Mexico was the best place to do it. They were looking at a lot of different locations, but they decided on Mexico. And of course, there was a few scenes that were in Rome, and they filmed those specifically in Rome. That's kind of hard to create Rome, but it's very easy to create a Mediterranean sea base. It was produced by Paramount and distributed by Paramount as well, with a release date of June 24th, 1970. It had a budget of $18 million, and it did make some money, not much. Had a box office receipt of $24.9 million here in the U.S. I don't think it did much European action or further east. And as always, I just like to go around the room and get everybody's thoughts, although I did think about doing this a little differently tonight. And maybe I'll just do it just for the sake of variety. But rather than get everybody else's thoughts on this film, I will give you my thoughts on this film, and we'll go straight into almost one of the last questions. I only got to watch this film once. My September schedule has been rather robust, to say the least. But I really, and I'm always one of these people who I think you need to watch a movie more than once, to really get the full depth of it. And especially with this movie, it's a complex movie. There's a lot going on. But my initial thoughts were that this was just kind of like a bunch of Monty Python sketches, kind of shoehorned into a film. Like I said, I do want to go and watch it again, but one of the questions that I asked toward the end of my list of questions was, did you find this film to be a smooth, flowing piece of work, or did you find it to be a bit disjointed and clunky in its approach? My initial opinion was I found it to be a little disjointed and clunky. Like I said, it seemed like a bunch of comedy sketches that were kind of shoehorned into a whole film. I have not read the book. I do have it at the museum, and I would like to read it. I started reading the first couple pages. Sorry, just a minute. What? No, stop. What are you doing? My dog's digging through the floor, and I don't want that. That will definitely not get me my deposit back. Thank you. And some of the reviews that I've read said that it tried its best to follow the book, but it just didn't quite cut it. And so I'm hoping that when I read the book, maybe my impression will change. Maybe once I watch it again, my impression will change. But we'll start with Lisa, since you're first in the batting order here, Lisa. Did you find this to be a smooth flowing film? Did you like it? Or did it seem a little, I don't know, kind of hard to follow, I suppose?
I found it hard to follow, but I think that was a little bit of the intent of it. It was this Catch-22 weird,
Okay.
there's this, but this, but this. So it kind of played that, but no, I did not like it. This is not my kind of humor and my kind of film. I didn't care for it, but it's worth watching and a discussion though.
Oh, for sure. And I like the way you put that. It was kind of like the whole Catch-22 rule itself. There's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You can go either way. And no, I like the way you phrased that. That was excellent. Yeah. Chris, you're next up in my list. How about you?
I saw this, as I recall, when it first came out. I'd forgotten a lot of it. There were some scenes that are, to me, iconic out of this movie. Whether it's "I'm the Bombardier," "I'm okay," that was one of them. But I liked it. But the second time around, it wasn't so much that it was disjointed. I think part of the problem is, because I've read the novel, is that basically Catch-22 is unfilmable as the novel is written. You really have to rejigger it a lot. They had to leave out a lot of characters that are in the book because the book is overwhelmed with characters. And if you don't cut them out, you have a movie that you just can't follow at all. I kind of agree with you about the Monty Python part. I don't think the whole film was like that, but particularly the scene with Bob Newhart in the office. That kept reminding me. All I could think about was John Cleese and the Monty Python crew. That was definitely a Monty Python moment for me. But overall, I liked it. It's not one of the best movies. I think Mike Nichols did as good a job as he could. I read that back in 1962 that Orson Welles had tried to buy the rights to it, and it hadn't worked out. And I don't even think that Orson Welles could have done anything better than what Mike Nichols did.
And Lisa, I'm going to assume this was your first time watching it, yes? Chris, how about you?
I saw it, as I recall, when it first came out. I watched it intermittently this week, and it was so intermittent that I had to go back and I watched it and straight through today again. So it's kind of 2.5 times.
All right. Russell, you're up next. What did you think? No, you're still muted, buddy.
I agree with what Lisa said. The humor is not my brand of humor. I didn't find it, somehow it didn't strike me. But I found it very disjointed. But I thought that the one review I read sort of hit it exactly the way I felt. And it said it's not so much a story as a string of tangentially related vignettes stripped of their original context. Because I'd read somewhere that World War II in the book itself was supposed to be life. And that somehow that is, and so everything that he's going through is supposed to be a symbol of life. Like we are trying to escape death, but we cannot escape death, and it's that sort of thing. And that's what Heller meant. I don't think much of that came through in the film.
Yeah, I agree. Is this? And I'm sorry. Have you read the book?
No, I did not read the book, and this is the first time I'd seen the film.
Okay. Mark, you're up next.
Yeah, I remember watching this film a long time ago, but only parts of it, and it came back to me. And I was gonna try to watch it this week, and I didn't get a chance. So I guess I'll mostly listen, but I agree with as I recall, the jumpiness and confusion it caused in me watching it long ago. And I guess I kind of like that in terms of the absurdity of the situation for Yossarian and putting the viewer into that kind of confusion too. And I'm still trying to figure out how it relates to its own time period, because it was made and released right in the middle of the Vietnam War era, but about the earlier World War II setting. So hope we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we will, as a matter of fact. I do have a couple points on that. Sally, you're next up. No, you're muted, Sally. Sorry. There you go.
All right, I'm sorry. I would give it 2 thumbs down. I absolutely hated the movie. I didn't think it was humorous at all. I found it almost offensive. I found their humor almost not a parody, but disgustingly down on. I know it's an anti-war movie, but nothing was sacred. I just found it repulsive, the whole movie.
Okay. I will throw this in there real quick before we move on to Jose. This is my kind of comedy. This is my kind of humor. I get a lot of grief for that because I find a lot of things seriously unfunny that everybody else loves, and the stuff that I love, they're just looking at me like, "How can you like that?" But this is my style of humor. Unfortunately, it just didn't click for me. Jose, how did you find the film?
Hello. I haven't seen the movie before, and I haven't read the book. About the humor, I find that it's a vehicle for making this announce. Maybe like everybody, well, everything in the world has a compromise, a catch. So in that sense, I really like the movie.
Okay, excellent. We'll move into my first set of questions. I'll go back all the way to the beginning. And let's talk
Adam?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss somebody?
Yeah, I think Adam.
Oh, I'm sorry, Adam. My fault. I didn't advance my screen far enough. Adam, welcome. What did you think of the film?
Yeah, so I enjoyed the film because I read the book years ago, and
Okay.
I could recognize some of the moments I recognized from the books. I kind of enjoyed getting to see that on screen, but there was a lot in the book that, they had to cut. Clearly they couldn't keep it in the movie. So I kind of feel like it could have been more. I kind of prefer the book over with all the extra stuff that they had and all the remaining characters that weren't able to make it in the film.
And was this your first time watching the film?
Yeah, first time watching the film.
Okay. So we seem to have kind of a consensus. Not our favorite film that we've brought on our program here. A couple of you liked it, a couple of you didn't, a couple of you are in the middle there. Like I said, I can't wait to go read the book. I did read like the first 10 pages the other day, which I probably shouldn't have because I was right in the middle of a different task. And so that kind of distracted me, and I just had to put it down and walk away and stay focused on what I was doing. But I am going to take it with me. Like I said, I do have it at the museum. I'm going to bring it home after cemetery tours are done and life kind of quiets down a little bit. I am interested in reading it. The first 10 pages that I read, they kind of really drew me in. And it started out nothing, the book started out nothing like the movie itself. So I'm curious to see how the book turns out. But let's talk a little bit about Alan Arkin's character, Captain Yossarian. And I really liked, first of all, I got to say, I really liked David Walken's cinematography. That opening shot of the sunrise coming up in the Mediterranean or in Mexico, whatever you like. At first, I was wondering if that is actually really a live shot or if it was, something else. But if you watch the ripples in the water, it was sped up a little bit, but that was definitely a very clearly planned shot by David Walken. And throughout the rest of the film, I really liked the cinematography. And I liked the way that he coordinated with Mike Nichols on the opening scene where you see Captain Cathcart talking with Yossarian as well as Colonel Korn, but you can't hear what they're saying. and that really drew me in. Those first couple minutes really drew me in, and I thought that was a very interesting way to start the film. But why do you think? And of course, if you watch the whole film, you do realize what was going on in that conversation. You do realize what happens afterwards. You are brought in as a personal witness as opposed to just somebody who can't hear or really tell what's going on. But why do you think he started the film that way?
I think that if he'd started it off the way that scene played out at the end, where you hear the dialogue, that it would have given away the story, part of the story.
Yeah.
And so what struck me about the whole opening, the sort of pastoral scene that you get with the water and the mountain and the sunrise and the birds and the dog barking and so on, and then all of a sudden you hear the planes starting up and the dust, and it's this idea that to me that of war disrupting nature in a very primal way. There's just no relief from it in a sense, because the noise and the dirt and so on was just so overwhelming once it gets going, and that sort of sets the tone, I think, for the rest of the movie.
And that's a good point, Chris, about war being disruptive. Just being in your face, no escaping it, and it really does cut into the serenity of the natural world, unfortunately. But that's and it does more than that, of course. But that's a good point to make for sure. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Lisa, go ahead.
Well, it was used to come back around, obviously, because it initiated with that, with some pieces missing, and then it came back around at the end and filled it in. So, but kind of other scenes in the movie did that as well. It's kind of like it was fill-ins, like, adding a little bit more explanation, sort of, by revisiting a part of what was going on.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and that's why I kind of find it kind of sketchy. Like I said, the Monty Python sketches, and then in between, you have to have some some connectivity, some way to transition from one scene to the next, and that's where you get this filler material. Like I said, I want to go back and watch it again. It didn't work for me the first time, but like I said, I think you need to watch a film more than once to really get a grasp of what the filmmaker is trying to do. Anybody else have any thoughts on that one?
The thought that occurred to me as I was watching it was that the way it would jumped around in time kind of reminded me a bit of Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, which was also a war set in the war scene where you're jumping around in time. And I think it's kind of that disjointedness that I think probably a lot of people feel in a war zone. That time doesn't proceed, in a sense, really chronologically in the way that it would in civilian life. And part of it too is sort of unfolding Yossarian's evolution, and particularly with the Snowden scenes, where he gradually unfolds just what's happened to Snowden, and all this is seen basically in flashback. I mean, the entire film is basically flashback, and to me that was a good way of the disjointedness working for this film. It doesn't always work, but in that sense, I thought it did.
Yeah, and sure, go ahead, Lisa.
I think the disjointedness for me kind of paralleled with the all of the most of the characters' kind of mental instability. Like they were very off. Like Milo was off. The guy who ended up pushing the girl out the window was off. Nately was off. Yossarian was off. So I think that the disjointedness, kind of like what Chris mentioned, kind of also exemplified all the mental disjointedness and breaks in the way that the characters were behaving.
That's actually a really good point that both of you bring up, and it kind of ties together. You know, I'm as Chris was talking, and as you were kind of going off on that, Elisa, you know, I was thinking of my own time at war, but I was only out there for 6 months. So maybe, you know, maybe when it's so short a time, you don't have that perspective. But if you're out at war for year, 2, 3, who knows? You know, maybe you do start to think like that, and time starts to, you know, kind of, at least in your head, be manipulated like that. That's an excellent point, and I'd like to maybe think about that a little more in detail as we look at more upcoming movies.
I
I
think,
hadn't thought about things like that before, but that's a good point. Go ahead, Chris.
yeah, I was going to say that here we have Yossarian in the war zone for 3 years. And you've got Cathcart constantly upping the requirements before you can go home. So that's going to have a big effect on how you view time, I think.
Oh, for sure.
It's like it's being taken away from you. I remember my dad telling me from World War II that they were supposed to go home, and then they got the orders to get on the boats to go to Japan for the invasion. And it was like, you know, your whole world gets disrupted. And I think, again, that comes back to, in a sense, some of the disjointedness in the film. Their whole lives were being disrupted constantly, whether it was by Milo or whether it was by Cathcart, whether it was by Dreidel. Their lives were not theirs to control. The only one who seemed to really be in control was Orr, who had figured out that if he practiced crash landing, he would get to Sweden.
And you know, I got to say, I am kind of a big Bob Balaban fan. I've seen him in so many movies and so many TV shows. He's not somebody who really jumps out at you, but if you see him enough, you just kind of really appreciate what he's trying to do with his acting. And I thought it was great to see him, especially at such a young age. Yeah.
I think of him from Waiting for Guffman. You know, the whole all those films in that whole oeuvre.
Right. So let's unpack the big question here, the whole Catch-22 situation. What the hell is that about? Who came up with it? Of course, this is something that was created just for the book and just for the movie. There was really no, I don't know, rationale. I can't imagine there was any sort of rationale in the real world during World War II. You know, this concept of, well, if you're crazy enough to do it, then you're sane. But if you're not crazy enough to do it, then you're sane as well because you want to live. So either way, you come up with nothing. But let's unpack that a little bit. What do you guys think about the way that was put forward in the movie and how it applied to all the characters in the movie?
I think that there's certain books or movies that create a terminology for what life throws at us. And I think that there's those situations where there's a no-win, you know, this or that. So in that book, I didn't read the book. I actually think I might have read part of it, but it's like there's no, so now that's a term that we use. It's a catch-22. There's no winning. You can do it this way or you can do it this way, but either way it's gonna fail. And another one that is the example of that is the movie Gaslight. Gaslight? The old if you haven't seen it, it gives meaning to the term that people use today of gaslighting, where you are creating a fakeness that you're telling what people see is not what they see. You're gaslighting them, and that you haven't heard that term.
Oh, I've heard the term. I
Pretty
haven't seen the
popular.
film though.
Yeah, and it's derived. I think it's derived from that film. So I think there's movies or literature that kind of capture things that happen in life, and then it becomes a term that we can all associate with.
Yeah, and and I like the way you put that, Lisa. Certainly art imitates life, and life does imitate art. And we do see a lot of examples, a lot of instances of things coming out of literature, of film, and even just fables and stories that they take on a certain connotation that we still carry on today. And you're right with Catch-22. We say that all the time. But who would have thought that term would come from something like this? Has anybody else got any thoughts on how that rule or whatever applies not only to the film but to how we perceive things in our regular lives?
I thought that in the film, the whole purpose of Catch-22 was that nobody gets out. I mean, it was the ultimate way of ensuring that regardless of how you felt, regardless of how serious your debility might be, they were still going to use you. And the only one who really figured it out was Orr. Again, he comes back. He saw what was happening. He figured out the way to work through Catch-22. He never tried to invoke it. He just made his own rule for the purpose of getting out.
And I did ask the question, was anybody surprised by Orr's escape plan? Did you see it, building up throughout the film, and then when he finally did it, you're like, yeah, I knew he was going to do that? Or did it come as a total surprise to you?
I'd remembered from the first time I saw it that somehow he got out, but I didn't remember exactly what it was. I remember that he had somehow survived all these crashes and that he survives in the film. But I'd totally forgotten that he had rode 4,000 miles to Sweden, if you can believe it anyway.
Yeah, and I can't. I certainly cannot believe that he rode a life raft 4,000 miles to Sweden. Anybody else got a thought on that one? Sure, go ahead, Mark. Mark, I can't see all my screens. So if anybody has something to say, just go ahead and jump in. I'm trying to flip back and forth, but I may not always be able to capture you trying to say something. But yeah, just go ahead and jump in. This is always a free-flowing discussion, and everybody's allowed to chime in. So go ahead, Mark.
Okay, thanks. I'm struggling to remember the film, but I do remember thinking that Catch-22 also relates to the madness of the situation and Yossarian trying to be logical, but it was crazy to be logical. So it was kind of a Catch-22 of his own mental situation or the craziness around him, as well as the problem of trying to survive or get out of the war.
But not just that. I mean, it was the whole absurdity of the situation. Not just that I don't know, rule, I suppose, but everything else that's going on around him. Minder Binder selling all their stuff, Cathcart being okay with it, Dreidel just being totally off his rocker.
What about the plane just chopping the guy off and his lower body standing there and finally collapsing?
And these things keep coming back. Like I said, I only saw it once, so I'm remembering all these little pieces as everybody's mentioning them. And it's just such a strange film. I really do want to go back and watch it again, but God, it just struck me as really odd when I watched it, and I don't know if I liked it or not. I'm right in between there. And there was something else I wanted to mention, but no, it's gone, totally gone. Yeah, okay. Let's talk a little bit about Lieutenant Minder Binder. And I do want to talk about some of these characters. And of course, I always ask at the end of the program, who was everybody's favorite character and why. And we'll definitely get to that. But let's talk about Lieutenant Minderbinder. How is this Joker? So many questions come up. How can he get away with all this stuff that he does? Of course, the obvious answer is easy, but I want to get everybody's thoughts on at least a couple of these characters, and I want to know what everybody thinks of Lieutenant Minderbinder.
I'd go to a. Oh, go ahead.
Is that the supply guy?
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
he's a supply. He came across as a supply guy, but he's actually the cook or the I don't know, the lieutenant.
The mess hall.
Yeah,
the mess hall
exactly,
guy.
mess hall guy. Yeah.
I took that at first. I didn't look at it this way, but as it went on, and to see the really nice vehicles with the nice canvas on them and the logos and the sign in the horror room and all of the patches and everything, I took it as corporate interwoven or corporate takeover of the military, the government.
And that's funny you mentioned that. I did watch a movie a couple of weeks ago called War Incorporated. And it was about, the American invasion of Iraq, but all the Iraqis are walking around with just corporate logos everywhere. And everything is so Americanized. And even on the sides of the tanks, there's logos painted of the different corporations and whatnot. And it was just so ridiculous. And so when you mention that, they didn't go overboard, but I could totally see where you're coming from. And I would wholeheartedly agree. Yeah.
I think it kind of captures. There was the one scene towards the end where the sergeant is with his girlfriend in bed, and she says something like, "I work for a big American company," and the sergeant turns and says, "So do I." and so you've got Milo Minderbinder, MM, kind of encapsulating that. I thought the movie. Even more than an anti-war movie, was really an anti-capitalist movie, and I think it captured a lot of that. The scene towards the end also, where Milo Minderbinder comes in that kind of long, it's almost like a limousine. He's standing up and he's got his armed guards beside him. Reminded me of some scenes of when Nazi officers sometimes entered various entered cities or something like that, or were riding around, and it made me think about fascism, which is really a corporate kind of rule.
For me, Chris, that was the point, because at first it was just him trying to get all these products and trade, and then it just started growing. And then like all the statues were there, like statues, really. And, and the parachutes were gone and everything. But then as you watch, like everything got nice. Like I said, like the trucks had really nice canvas on them with MM logos and everything. But when he came in on that vehicle, that's when I was like, oh yeah, they completely took over. He completely took over. The corporation completely took over. And then when he goes up to find the guy who pushed the girl out the window, there's his girlfriend, his lover or whatever, and she's like, "Oh, I work for Milo," and it's the connection that she had mentioned before, but it's like there's the whole bought and sold, corporate takeover.
And I don't know if this relates to that, Lisa. I mean, you're absolutely right. And those are excellent points. What struck me as kind of odd, at least along those lines, was when General Dreedle's plane lands. Even his plane has the flags like you would see on the Jeeps. What plane has flags on them like that? And it was curtains on the windows. And it was just so bizarre to look at that. And that's when I kind of started looking at it the way you obviously looked at it much sooner than I did. But it's just, God, it's just a strange movie.
I think that I was going to say, I think that Mindbender was all presented in a very absurdist fashion, and I think the part that and a bit surreal, and the part that I at least found humorous was when he goes to open the box, medical box, in order to help what was it, Nately.
Nately?
He pulls the box down, in order to put something around his arm in order to stop the bleeding. He pulls the box down, it's empty, and inside there is that card that has the name of that corporation they came up with. In the same way, when he went to use his parachute, he goes to get the parachute. Instead, there's a card, and the parachute's gone. There's a card with the corporate logo on it.
And if I'm not mistaken, the card said something like, "You now have like 1/10 of 1,000 share of the company," or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's just
A certificate of ownership.
yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, yeah. Oh, anyway, okay. Another character I want to talk about is Major Major. I was really, I like Bob Newhart, and I thought that this, I only know Bob Newhart from his very soft and just his very nice persona, the Bob Newhart show with his sweaters and everything. For me, this was just this was looking at him in a whole nother light, but with the same comedy that he always brought to everything else. And I just want to get everybody's thoughts on Major Major, and particularly why he would only hold meetings in his office when he wasn't there. When he was there, he could not hold meetings, and he was always ducking out the window. Anybody want to chime in on that? I found it very interesting.
I think that part, sorry, I keep jumping in right away, but
Lisa, you do not have to apologize whatsoever.
I don't want to hog up the time from anybody else. But that part I thought was like a catch-22. You can't win.
Okay.
If he's there but you can't see him, then you can't see him. If he's not there, you can't see him. So there's no win. It's a catch-22.
That's an excellent point. Excellent. Anybody else? Why did his pictures keep changing in his office? Every time he would walk by, first it's Roosevelt, and then he walked by again, and there's Churchill, and he walked by again, and it's Stalin. I mean, I get the big three. Obviously, from World War II, you do have the big three. They've had many meetings to plan the course of the war, to end the war. But what was the point of having those pictures change in the film itself? Has anybody sussed that one out?
I thought it might have been just sort of a small indication about the lack of constancy in a war zone. That everything is in constant. It's always changing. You can't really be certain what's going to be coming up next. And so he passes at one time it's Roosevelt, he passes another time it's Stalin. And perhaps also that there were in the context of war, there's really no difference between among the three leaders.
Yeah, and just you saying that, Chris, that kind of jogged my mind a little bit. Maybe not only that, but it kind of goes to show how absurd it can get. To go from Roosevelt to Churchill, to Stalin, and showing the change, like you said, the change doesn't always necessarily equate to a positive or a forward moving change. And sometimes in the military, for those of you who served, sometimes that change is made sometimes just for the sake of change, and it doesn't always make for the best policy. So maybe that was another point of it too. Go ahead, Lisa.
I didn't notice it changing. I just saw the Stalin one, but now that you're mentioning it, his demeanor changed in that scene as well. At first, he was kind of kerfluffled and, oh, I don't really want to be here. And then he got more assertive, like, this is how it's going to be. You tell them this and you tell them that. And he got more controlling. And then he jumps out the window, and then he kind of came back a little bit and poked his head in and said something like a little off. But I didn't connect it at the time, or it may not even be a connection, but I didn't notice the changes, but I did notice a change in his demeanor, like throwing the little mustache on and just becoming more aggressive and directive in what he was saying.
You know, I was going to bring that up too. As you were saying that, I was thinking, oh, sorry. Man, it hurt. I was thinking as well, you know, he did change it, and you said he was changing as the scene was progressing. And my first thought was, yeah, he put the mustache on. He was changing as well.
Well,
Yeah, you know, I'm taking all these notes, and this next time I watch it, it's going to be like a 5-hour watch, because I'm going to go through and pick this thing apart with all my notes. It's going to drive me nuts, but I'll probably do it anyway.
To pick up on Lisa's point, maybe part of it, as he's changing, he's becoming more authoritarian. And putting on the mustache may be a follow-up to Stalin's mustache.
And maybe that's why Stalin was at the end of the changing of the pictures. Yeah, I don't know. See, that's why I like to have these conversations with you folks, because you guys always bring up so many different points that I don't pick up on. I don't know. Maybe I'm slow.
The other thought that I had was, it was just he wanted to see if the audience would pick it up, would see the change, and just as a kind of another absurdist kind of thing. There's a scene in an entirely different movie, the Cary Elwes version of, or Mel Brooks version of Robin Hood, Men in Tights, yeah, where the Prince John, the mole on his face keeps changing, keeps moving around. And I sort of thought of the pictures as kind of emblematic of that as well. Just, you know, an absurd kind of notion about what in that scene.
Before we move on, does anybody else have anything to highlight or bring to the conversation about some of the things that we talked about? Go ahead,
about the things you have talked, the leaders changing the photos, and maybe the movie being a critic of the system. I think that it might be related in a way that all the authorities that should be doing their job, but they are not there. They are not, well, they are, but following their own interests, not the people's interests. So maybe that's also part of the case that you mentioned before, about the authorities being there but not being there also at the same time.
Yeah, and maybe you could even look at it, you know, toward the authorities changing as well as the film goes on. You know, you have the colonel, you have the general, and those are supposed to be the authority figures, but they're the ones who are just trying to get on the side with the Corporation or with Milo Minderbinder, and they're not really doing their job and leading. And I did ask the question in the film notes, you know, what is this film trying to say with regard to leadership in general and in war in particular? You know, we've seen a lot of movies, or we've watched a lot of movies that we've discussed where there's fantastic leadership. We've watched a lot of movies where there's horrible leadership. I don't want to say that the authority figures in this film that are supposed to be the authority figures are doing a terrible job, but they're certainly not doing the job that they have been brought in to do. And especially with Cathcart. Let's talk about Cathcart for a second. What do you think his overall position is in this film? Not in the unit, not what he's supposed to be doing, but just in the film in general. What is his position in the film, and how does he move the plot along?
Like Jose said, that the just thinking of themselves and not of the bigger group not advancing anything for the bigger picture. He kind of is a big obstructionist and just has what, like, he wanted to be in that magazine. That was it's like, and just sitting on the toilet when the guy comes in, it's always about him and nothing really about the bigger picture. It was, so I kind of bounce off what Jose was saying.
Speaking of the scene where he's sitting on the can while Chaplin comes in, that's actually a scene that was written about in terms of Lyndon Johnson as president, that he would humiliate people by having them come in while he was sitting on the toilet to force them to talk with him when he was in that position and keep them off guard.
So bizarre.
No kidding. Well, I thought Cathcart was an exaggerated example of a colonel who is eager to make general and will basically do anything to make general. So he's going to increase the number of missions required to create new records for his record. And the way he becomes so obsequious to General Riedel, that's what struck me, was that in terms of leadership, he was the example of the kind of leader that puts his ambition above the welfare of the people below him.
And unfortunately, we see a lot of that, particularly in World War I and World War II, definitely in Vietnam. I would really like to hope that sort of mentality has changed over time, and it's not like that in the military now. I know that's not the case, but still, I like to be a little bit optimistic and hope that it's not. But I'm sure that there's still those sorts of people out there. We are almost running out of time here. I do want to talk about General Riedel real quick. I am a huge Orson Welles fan. I love both his directorial style and his acting. And sometimes we even get to combine those two. Not the case. Well, actually, no, it is kind of the case in this one. He definitely had an impact on Mike Nichols. Although he was hired to play this part, he definitely, the 8 days, and he was only on set for 8 days filming his role. He definitely put the screws to Mike Nichols, but in a very nice way, from what I understand. You're shooting it this way, but have you ever thought of shooting it this way? And Mike would go back and he would look at it, and he pretty much bent his way to Orson Welles' suggestions as far as how to shoot a scene, how to direct his actors, and so on and so forth. What does everybody else think about, at the very least, General Riedel as a character in the film played by Orson Welles, and maybe expand it out a little bit more if you can, just Orson Welles in general and what he brings to any project that he's on.
This is because I don't have a big film background, so I don't know Orson Welles. I know he was in like some really big movies, right? Really classic movies, but I didn't see them. But it was the Red-Nosed Reindeer things that his music, or his, it's at the beginning of Rudolph and those little animated ones at Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I think of Orson Welles as, like a granddaddy, like.
Huh. Okay. All right.
And so he was way out of the box for me.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to chime in on Mr. Welles? No, nobody is.
Normally, I really like Orson Welles as an actor. I find him a fascinating character in those old black and white film noirs. This movie, he had to go. Just get him out of there. I didn't care for him at all. And the stupid girlfriend thing. Like, oh, please.
She was merely eye candy throughout the whole movie.
Oh,
And,
she
and,
was
and she,
something, all right.
she served a purpose in a couple of scenes. The scene where they're all in the tent and somebody says, or he says, can somebody get the lady a chair? And, everybody's just clamoring over on top of each
Right.
other to provide this chair for her.
And I don't know how she walked in that skirt. It was so dang tight.
I'm trying to think, did she even have a line?
I think she had some idiot, dumb blonde line. I don't remember what it was.
I think the most that she had was when she was giggling when Yossarian shows up naked for the award
Oh,
ceremony.
yeah.
And then he tells her, you slut, get back into the car or whatever.
And I'm certainly not presupposing anything about the age of my audience, but I'm sure that probably just about everybody in this room knows who Art Garfunkel is. Yes.
Yes.
This was his very first acting role. What did you think of that? Going from being a musician with Simon and Garfunkel to being put in front of a camera and put in a major motion picture?
Until you said that, I didn't realize that it was the singer. It never occurred to me.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Paul Simon was also filmed for it, but his scenes were cut.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I thought he did a pretty decent job. I thought that scene where he's having that discussion with the old Italian guy was a bit stilted and kind of awkward. But in general, I thought he carried himself pretty well for somebody doing a movie for the first time, particularly as a singer, not probably having much experience in that kind of thing.
I wouldn't judge anybody's acting by this movie. I said I wouldn't judge anybody's acting by this movie because I thought they were all awful, but that's just me.
Sally, hopefully before the end of the year, we're going to watch a movie that you like.
I liked Born on the 4th of July a lot.
Oh, no, that's okay. Okay.
Yeah, right. I did like that one.
I just had a thought and I lost it. I was going to say Art Garfunkel as well. He still has his really, young, boyish looks in this film. I think that was maybe part of the casting decision there. And every time he smiled, he's got such a great smile. And it just really engages you. At least it did me anyway. Last couple of questions I want to talk about. The set design and the film location. Before I do any research on a movie, before I make any notes or draft all these questions, I just sit down and watch the film. I don't try to do anything in advance. I want to be, into the film and then find out all the details later. Did you really think that they were on, in the Mediterranean, or could you tell it was Mexico and they just kind of threw this thing together a little bit?
To me, it looked Mediterranean. I didn't have any problem with the set designs or the cinematography of the settings or anything. Just the movie.
I didn't feel that it was like I didn't know where it was located or anything, but there was something that felt it was created. There was a little feeling that it was created.
Oh, I didn't pick that up.
Yeah, I didn't think it had a Mediterranean look to it at all.
Okay.
Oh,
all right.
Okay.
They spent, I think it was they spent $180,000 to make a 5-mile runway, if I have my facts straight. But then I read somewhere where they spent another $250,000 to make like a 1-mile run. So they definitely built runways, in full for this movie to put out there. They also were able to get 18 of the B-25s, Liberators, which they're using in this film.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't have in my notes here who did the sound for this film, but every time one of those planes the engines were going, you could just feel it. Oh man, I felt it in my hair, I felt it in my chest, and especially that scene where they're all taking off at once. I thought that was a fantastic scene. You know,
Yeah.
usually when you see something like that portrayed in a war film, and particularly a World War II film, everything's all nice and smooth, and the planes take off nice and straight, and everything looks, you know, so orderly. These planes were just everywhere as they were taking off. I was just waiting for one of them to crash into another.
That I did
I just thought it was so fantastic the way that they were able to film that. And I can't even imagine where they got. So they got 18 B-25s, but where did they get 18 B-25 pilots? That just, these are the things that I start thinking of. And
That
then,
scene, I was going to say that scene of them taking off also struck me. Because of the awkwardness of the flight, my thought was these looked like aircraft that aerodynamically couldn't fly. Somehow they managed to make them go. And then it made me think of an occasional, you know, nature photography where they show bumblebees flying around, leaving as a group, and they aren't in a nice orderly pattern.
Well,
they look like
that's a good one.
those B-25s taking off. So I was thinking of the B-25s as, you know, basically bumblebees for war.
That's
That's
so funny,
good.
Chris. And now you got me thinking, you know, maybe if in reality those planes were loaded down with all the bombs that they were supposed to have, you'd think they'd take off a little straighter. They wouldn't be subject to the wind currents and whatnot that was making them fly all over the place. So you could tell that they were pretty light as they were taking off. And then the scene in the beginning where Milo and Colonel Cathcart are talking, and the B-25 comes in behind them and totally crashes. Either they had a hell of a stunt team put that scene together, or they were doing some sort of, I don't know, some sort of special effects. But I mean, I really think that plane crashed. I really think they did plan a crash right behind Martin Balsam and John Voight. And as actors standing there as a B-25 is crashing behind you, has got to be a frightening experience.
I think the Wikipedia article about the movie writes a little bit about that, and that they actually did take and destroy one of those planes. And at least at the time of the article, they said it was still there on that airstrip.
Yeah, they said they buried it or something, right? They gave it a ceremonial burial, and yeah.
There was also
just to put one scene together like that and capture it in full and capture it perfectly the first time. You know, this is 1970. There's no CGI. There's nothing like that. So that was rather impressive to me.
There was also
there is one scene where you can also appreciate the art. Is in the plane when the protagonist receives this call, telling that he has to be careful of and he sees his friend and he's wounded, and you can see the effort to make the interior of the plane, but it's not really well done. But maybe you can appreciate the art in this scene.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you're absolutely right, Jose. There's a lot more room than probably would have been afforded to those crew members. And the camera was able to move around. But I thought they did at least a decent job in the bomber scenes, whether they're in the plane or they're showing the exterior of the plane themselves. You know, I really enjoyed those. And then, like I said, the sound of the plane, how, you know, they just really captured the engine sounds of those B-25s. I've seen a B-25 take off and land before, just a single one. I can't imagine 18 of them all at once. That's just really gotta thump your chest.
there was apparently a tragedy associated with those bombers as well.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris. I'll let you tell it.
Apparently one of the camera crew on one of the flights decided not to wear a harness.
Yeah.
And fell out of the plane into the ocean.
I mean, they were like what, 5,000-6,000 feet up, something like that.
Yeah, I think they said 4,000
straight
feet.
out, and I mean, holy smokes. Nowadays, that would shut down a production like that. And the film probably would not be finished. But this is 1970. Things are a little different. But I can't imagine being the second unit camera operator. And first of all, why would you not put a harness on? Are you that brave? And then to actually fall out of the plane to your death. Oh my God. There's a lot of ways I could think about going, and that is not one of them.
Maybe he had an M&M share, and he didn't have the harness.
Once again, life imitates art, art imitates life. We are just about out of time, so I do want to go through and find out who everybody's favorite character or actor was. Lisa, once again, you're first up in the batting order. So who was your favorite character?
Okay, I'm gonna go with Orr, and it's not really because the ending, because I don't know. It was earlier in, I kind of felt like there was this thing where he was over being crazy, like he was trying to sell it to everyone, kind of like Jamie Farr and MASH. He was trying to sell it that he was crazy. I was getting that feeling. And then it kind of diminished, and I saw the real him when he was doing that thing with the lantern, and he was talking, and he was looking for that little piece, and he said something. It was all dark, and he said something to Yossarian about how he wouldn't be there or something, and Yossarian said, "What's going to happen to you?" or what, whatever. And he just kind of went about, but he was very serious, very meticulous. He said, "I want you to have this stove. I want you to have this and everything for winter." And that to me was like the real him. And then he was playing everybody else. But I didn't connect that to the end until you guys were talking about it.
Excellent observation. Excellent. Russell, how about you?
I like Yossarian. I just thought he did a really good job, in that role. I like his facial expressions, and I just thought he handled the role well.
All right, Sally. Nope, you're muted, Sally. Sorry. Nope, you're still muted. There you go.
Oh, even though I agree with Russell on Yossarian. Even though I didn't like the character of the movie, I thought Alan Arkin's acting was top of the line. I thought he carried off a goofball quite well. But then he had serious moments. He also did well.
Yeah,
you're
right.
The way he was so upset about that guy pushing that girl out the window and getting away with it. Like, who cares? But he was so upset by that. And I guess I like that part.
Yeah, and I've never been a big Alan Arkin fan, but I did enjoy his role in this film for sure.
Me too.
Jose, who was your favorite character and why?
Also Lazarian, because when he had the opportunity to choose, he didn't like the option of being with the Catch-22, so he decided to left it. And also, I found really striking that all the owners of the sharing were going to die.
Oh, okay. Mark, how about you?
Yeah, I have to say Yossarian also. That's some catch, that Catch-22.
And let's see, Adam, how about you? Who's your favorite character and why?
I kind of like the chaplain because I just felt like he was doing his best to try to help people, but he just kept getting stopped at every turn. Nobody really wanted to work with him, but I just liked how at least he was trying.
And that was Anthony Perkins' role, correct? Captain Tapman, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Chris?
To pick up, I just want to pick up on a point that Lisa made about Orr, that his meticulousness about that stove kind of hints at the idea that none of those crashes were accidental. that he had meticulously planned those as well, and that becomes pretty clear, I think, by the end of the film. But I think Lisa's right about that little scene where he's looking for that little piece, and he's got to just have it. As far as my I think it's for me, it's got to be Yossarian. I mean, Alan Arkin, I think he's a terrific actor. from, Russians are coming to Argo. And I think he carries off this role as well as anybody could have. I can't imagine anybody else in that role.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll be a little bit outside the box. First of all, I'll look at inanimate objects. I really like the planes. If you couldn't tell, I've talked about them quite a bit. And a character in a film doesn't always have to be a living person. It could be something else that plays a significant role in the film. So the planes, I really enjoyed those. As far as a living person goes, I think Richard Benjamin as as Major Danby. All his little speeches that he gives before they go on missions, those had me on the floor. And they're not necessarily hilarious, but when you put those words with the situations, and especially with his facial features and his smiles, and he was delivering them so sarcastically, but at the same time he was completely serious. And I really liked Richard Benjamin's role. I thought that was really well done. That's what kept me going throughout the movie. Was just waiting to see the next time he would come on screen. And now that I've been tainted by everybody's observations and everybody's viewpoints, and I go back and watch this, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, oh I knew that. Oh yeah, of course. It's going to make for an interesting second watch, that's for sure. As you might have noticed, I have no idea what next month's movie is. I have not got it up for registration yet. I've been so busy with cemetery tours, and they do kick off next week, so I'm going to try my best to get that up as far as registration goes, and I've got a few more events I need to get up as well. I'd like to have that done by the end of next week. And I was trying to think, I don't have access to certain work drives at home that I would at work, which means I can't. No, I don't know, Lisa. I honestly, I cannot recall what movie I have scheduled for next month. It very well could be Dunkirk. I don't think it is, but who knows? But definitely, please look for that coming up in the next week.
Find one Lisa likes and Sally likes.
Well, since I haven't got it up, I can change it now, right? And nothing's set in stone. I can make it whatever I want. So who knows? Maybe we will do Dunkirk. I'll look and see, though. I will be in the office for a little bit tomorrow before I go back out to the cemetery. Definitely look and see what it is, and maybe I'll consider changing it. Who knows? But I do want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. It's always wonderful to have all my people here and just discussing movies and being movie nerds, and particularly with maybe a movie we all didn't really necessarily like or love, but there's still a lot to talk about. And especially when you talk about a movie with so many characters and such a unique and maybe odd movie, it really does lend itself well for discussion. So thank you all for joining me tonight.